Hello, I'm Naya, and I am doing a Destro, Resto, Magicka Nightblade build. I'm calling it the Shadow Walker because now we are actually... It seems like we're walking through the shadows more with the fact that Lotus Fan is actually a useful skill now. Previously, Lotus Fan just didn't do quite enough damage, nor did the cost really warrant that much of a cost. It did very little damage, and the only thing it did was teleport us closer to our opponent, which was nice. But in an age where melee MagBlade was dying out, there was really no point in doing it. Now we are a more aggressive caster, yet also somewhat melee focused build. You can still do a more traditional kitey, kitey avoid Falcon snare build if you want. That still works. However, I prefer being a little bit more aggressive, and I find this playstyle to be a hell of a lot more fun than that. My bars aren't too drastically different, actually. So let's have a look-see with the bars. Same 3 skills here. This one I just changed the morph. Debilitate is now kind of better than Cripple because it has Minor Magicka Steel, and that really helps fix one of the MagBlade's main issues, which was Sustain. Now we can say that MagBlade is one of the kings of Sustain again, or queens in this case. We replace Flame Reach, or Flame Touch if you use that morph, with Lotus Fan. Now, there are a couple reasons we did this. One, the dot is noticeably better than Lotus, or than Flame Reach, so that's more pressure. On top of that, the minor vulnerability that it now gives is basically replacing the loss of our minor berserk. So while a lot of people are noticeably upset about the loss of minor berserk, we are also gaining minor vulnerability. So it's a lower duration. It's only 8 seconds, but there's so much in this skill that makes it actually useful and fun to use now, so that's why we're using it. It's also technically an AoE ability too. That means if I'm fighting outnumbered, I can use this and it will hit people around the area of where I teleport as well, which is actually really nice. Debilitate can now be used on more than one target. Again, that's a lovely thing. It's absolutely amazing. You might also notice that I'm back to playing a Dunmer rather than a Breton. I did this primarily for the damage. You can also go with High Elf. That has some really nice stamp sustain, but Breton still would be better if you're having sustain problems, like if you're in no CP, but overall, you have no defensive spammable. So there's really no point in playing Breton. I can achieve similar, if not better, results with just using one cost reduction glyph, and it's just as good. And Soul Harvest did not get changed. Sadly, it didn't get Reeve, but I've changed a few things around, so I don't really need Reeve. Like, I was planning on doing something very fucking different, so I'm actually really glad that I came up with this instead. On our back bar, we've got Tether instead of Soul Harvest. I've noticed a few issues with Tether in that it's not tethering people sometimes. It's kind of weird. But it's a stun, and it does a fair amount of damage, so really nice ability. Siphoning attacks, our basic sustain skill, also gives us a little bit of health. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to make sure I have siphoning attacks up, of course, then I'll pop Healing Ward, and then I'll do Resto Heavy. So that gives me a lot of different things. From a Resto Heavy attack, I gain, let's see here, you get Major Mending, which is 25% more healing. Black Rose Resto, Major Vitality, 30%. So I'm getting a over 50% increased heal on whatever this heal will come out to be. It isn't always, sometimes it crits for like 1,000 health, but if I'm doing that Resto Heavy, that's a lot of healing. So it's really nice. I have gone back to Healing Ward because I wanted to try it out a bit. I honestly feel like Healing Ward and Ward Ally are kind of matched now. healing ward after that. Sometimes if it's still there after that 6 seconds, which you can get it to do if you use cloak, it's great, you know, it gives you some nice extra healing, but the issue with that is that that's not always going to happen. And because it only casts the ward on one person, sometimes you're left out, which is the beauty of ward ally. So I don't know, actually. Healing ward is kind of nice, but ward ally is also really nice. I feel like they're kind of evenly matched now. I still really miss the healing, the initial heal of healing ward. I feel like that's something that should be reverted to in some partial way. Like before, it gave enough healing that you could tank a lot of damage that you should not have been able to tank. But removing the initial heal outright was not a good idea whatsoever. I don't know, it used to be like a 3k heal non-crit sometimes, so I feel like if they remove that and just put it down to like a 1k heal base, then that would be fine, but that's not what they did. Phantasmal Escape. Okay, so here's the thing. A lot of people really like Race Against Time. I do too. I actually haven't decided which one I'm going to use. I feel like if I was using Dark Cloak, I would be using Race Against Time, because oftentimes I find that just shading away from your opponent isn't enough. They're probably going to chase after you a little, and which is where Cloak comes in really handy. But if you want to use Dark Cloak, then I highly suggest replacing Phantasmal Escape with Race Against Time. That expedition will get you a pretty long way. The defensive part of Phantasmal Escape is actually pretty powerful though. You know, it reduces the damage by all area of effect abilities such as Dawnbreaker, which is used very frequently by stamina classes. It also reduces the damage done by jabs, which is the Templar spammable. So very important ability, and naturally we also get 4 seconds of snare immunity, so it's essentially Magicka Shuffle. Thank God, you know, we've only been waiting for this for a very long time. Cloak is Cloak, y'all know that, right? It's now a flat 3 seconds instead of 2.9, which I feel like is really nice, because when I was learning to play MagBlade, now I just know when to cloak. But I would always try and like count to 3, and then that 0.1 second would really catch me off guard sometimes. That's just when I was learning it and I was more sensitive to it. Now I'm gonna go over our stun. So yeah, you've probably noticed we don't have Flame Reach on our bar anymore, which means we need a new stun, and that stun is Mass Hysteria. So great thing about this ability. A while ago, ZeniMax nerfed it to only fear 2 targets, which was incredibly stupid considering the fact that Streak has always been able to stun 6 people. And so now Fear, yet again, can stun 6 people, which is great. It's a get the fuck off me button. If I'm being swarmed, I hit this and people, well, they stop hitting me. It's absolutely amazing. That's kind of all for the skills. This is your CC, you're going to want to swap to your back bar and use it. Another thing that you might want to learn to do is that when you have a full stack of Merciless, it's typically good to combo that with the Healing Ward. So I often cast Healing Ward before I use my Merciless, because Merciless now has a 50% heal on it, which means I will get 50% of the damage done in health. And that will be increased even further by my Healing Ward's by the 30% major vitality from Black Rose Resto. I find that to be really fucking helpful, and because I'm not using Troll King a lot of the time, I find that just that's how I'm gonna get my healing, really. Strife just doesn't do enough healing, and that is currently the major drawback of the class, which is really fucking weird considering the fact that we have a whole tree called Siphoning, and yet for some reason Magicka Dragonite can still heal better than us. Nani the fuck? Anyways, moving on. I'm using PvE spell power pots because, one, I don't like carrying multiple potions. I find the PvE spell power pots make that simple, so whenever I want to go do dungeons, it's not a problem. But at the same time, I don't have any source of sorcery or prophecy, so yeah. That's my sources of prophecy and intellect. With the potion, our stats go up to a pretty nice amount. We've got almost by 50% crit and a little over 2.5k spell damage, and 2.5k is kind of where I like to be. I don't like going under that. And also our Magicka is above 35k, which is again my marker. We're at almost 38k, just below that. I'm using Graftar right now, so that helps bump up the max magic. You can use Valken. Valken is also a really nice tool. I think Graftar is nicer for pulling fucking cloak blades out of cloak. You know, when you get close to them, they're just trying to cloak away. It's got an 8-meter range on it. It's undodgeable. It's unblockable. It's an amazing monster set, highly underrated. And it's been one of my favorites ever since I started playing MagBlade. I can use it again, except I've had to use Troll King sometimes. In fact, at the gameplay video that I'm going to show at the end of this video, I will be using Troll King because I'm fighting a 70k health werewolf that does no damage except when he goes into werewolf form, in which he actually does a little bit of damage, and it's really annoying. And I knew I was going to run into him again, so I put Troll King on, and that's what I'm having to deal with. So that really helps with your healing. If you're fighting one person, you can typically manage to not use Troll King. In fact, I fought a Stam DK, a friend of mine who's a very good Stam DK, multiple times. We never stalemated, which is something that doesn't happen a lot. He either crushes me or I crush him, and instead we were just kind of going at it back and forth a lot. It was really nice. It felt good for once. The pressure of Balrogs was really nice. Or not Balrog, Graftar. I did use Balrog too. I like it. I don't think it's the best for this build though. I do kind of miss it sometimes. And Troll King is just, it fixes our class's major problem, which is lack of healing. But the damage on Graftar is just so good, I don't really want to give it up a lot of the time. So I try and switch to Graftar when I can. I can't always. So officially, this build uses Graftar just for simplicity's sake. If you need more healing, you can use Troll King, or you could slot a completely different ability. I noticed that while playing a Breton, I could easily afford to not have siphoning attacks, and I could have Blessing of Restoration. But with a Dunmer with just one glyph being a cost reduction enchantment, I could sustain almost as well with my normal rotation, just using siphoning attacks and debilitate without, like, with a bunch more damage. I'm losing minimal amount of damage, which is great. I would also do this on a high elf. You don't really get the stam sustain. That's one of the reasons I like Dunmer, is I have 15k max stam, and that's just from being a Dunmer plus having triglyphs. So that's my reasoning there. I'm wearing Innate Axiom and Magicka Bone Pirate, aka Brightthroat Boast, bro. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm wearing Brightthroat and Innate Axiom. I have experimented with spinners, and let me just put it this way, I don't like it. The thing about Innate Axiom is that it gives us one line of stam. If I didn't have that one line of stam, I'd probably be at 14k, which is still really good. I'd actually be at like 14.4 maybe. So it's still pretty good, but I'm also using it for that line of spell crit. I really like spell crit. I like crit, in case you guys haven't noticed. That is very important to me. So that line of crit, that line of stam, plus the 5-piece, making my Merciless and my Strife hit really fucking hard, is just great. I love it. So that's why I'm using that set. I'm using Sharpened on my front bar instead of Nirnhoned for once, which is kind of rare for me, but since there's a lot of heavy armor builds going around, I felt like Sharpened was a better option. In fact, if you just consider this for a second, Sharpened is almost the same value as the 3-piece on Spinners, right? So why would I use Spinners when I can use Innate Axiom but Sharpened? Just a thought. I really like Innate Axiom Sharpened. I tried Spinners Sharpened. It was nice, I guess. I tried it with Nirnhoned. I just didn't see much of a difference, but I really like Nirnhoned, so that's why I'm using it. Backstaff, we got Black Rose Resto. Good shit. Probably gonna have to use this for the rest of time, sadly. And we have that as defending, because that's the best thing to have back there. Contrary to popular belief, having a powered staff is not actually that helpful. Most of the time, you're better off with Nirnhoned than powered, unless you have certain multipliers. And Just to be frank, we don't have any good healing source. So having a powered staff isn't very helpful. You can also have decisive on your back bar, and you can use, well, that just really helps with any sort of ultimate generation, but I prefer the defending for that extra resistance, because that bumps me up to almost 20k resistances, which is pretty nice for a light armor build. Another thing I should mention is that this took kind of a while, but I have full protective jewelry for my bright throat jewelry. I was like, I originally started with 1, and I thought, okay, this is nice, but I'm kind of squishy. I'm still pretty squishy. 2, I'm like, okay, this is significantly better, but I'm still pretty squishy. Now that I have 3, I feel a lot better. And it hasn't harmed my damage as much as I thought it would, but it is a noticeable change. So I wouldn't go all out if you feel it necessary not to. You also notice I have 4 into health. I don't know why, but just ever since I started playing MagBlade, it's just been traditional for me to put 4 into health, because PvE reasons, I don't like being under 16k health in PvE, and in PvP I find that 4 health is actually pretty helpful. Honestly, you'll gain more in PvP with 4 health than you will with 4 in Magicka. It's a very minimal loss, and it's also a very minimal gain, but when I look at my stats, I do feel more comfortable about it. So, going with that. As I mentioned earlier, I have 1 cost reduction glyph, the rest is spell damage. And yeah, let's take a look at our Mundus. I have Vampire in this, don't pay attention to that. That's just there because I haven't taken it off yet. I'm using the Apprentice. You can also use the Mage, and I have been suggested the Ritual, and I have had minimal success with it. It's okay. I'm honestly not sure how I feel about it still. I feel like the damage that you give up to have the Ritual is not worth it though, sadly. I feel like if I could like use half of the Ritual and then half of the Apprentice, that would be pretty nice. Yeah. And then we have food, Witch Mother's Potent Brew. It got nerfed. It's not as good as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. I haven't found a need to replace it. I have considered using 2 regen glyphs and then just going with blue food. You know, and that's an option, but I'm also losing damage when I tried that on PTS. But before the change came out, I tried it on PTS. I lost damage, so I'm just going to stick with this. And it works pretty well, actually. For people who are just picking up Nightblade, because I know there are a lot of newer players that come with Elsweyr, for no matter what you're doing, be it PvE or PvP, I highly suggest getting the add-on Grim Focus Counter. This will show up that little red thing that pops up on my reticule in the middle of the screen, and it helps me keep track of where my Merciless is. For a long time, I got pretty used to just doing it by the sound, but that was, you know, it never told me where I was. I was very good at knowing it by the sound. I just never knew how many stacks I had until I could fire it. So having that visual representation is very helpful, and there's also a few other fun parts of the add-on that I'm sure you could play around with. So that's something I suggest doing. Also, I don't know why, but when playing on Stamblade, I feel like I really got used to Shade more. I got a lot better at using Shade, so if anyone is ever like, oh, well, I'm shit at Shade, so MagBlade isn't good for me, take a vacation, play Stamblade with Shade. I have a build called the Honor Blade, and that build will carry you through learning Shade. I'm not sure why, I just feel like I learned it better that way. Let's take a quick look at CP. Be relatively quick. I have 14 into Sprinter. This is just kind of my leftover, and then I have 52 into Warlord. The website will say 53. Not much of a difference. Mooncalf, 45. I just have this because jump points, and I really like this passive. Like, I know it's not a great passive, but you can really notice that 2% speed sometimes. And for the most part, I've seen some very optimized builds not have 120 points into this, but I feel like I want it because I really like that passive. So I have that passive, and I put 75 in Arcanist and 45 into Mooncap. The next one, we do a fair amount of dodging, even as a Magicka build. I have 52 into Tumbler. The website might say 53, but it's not a huge difference. I put 11 into Befoul, not much. It's both kind of a like out of respect for other players. It's not very fun to fight against someone who has like 80 points into Befoul, and then you just get defiled and you can't heal. That's not very fun to play against. So both out of respect for other players and because I want to put my champion points somewhere else, I don't put a lot into Befoul. I just put a little bit to help boost that, because Befoul is pretty cost effective. So all things considered, I'm not losing a lot if I put 11 points into a foul. It just helps me secure a kill in my Soul Harvest. And then I have 21 points into Shadow Ward. This just helps if I have to block, and typically you will have to do a bit of blocking. You just have to manage your stamina carefully. Now we're going into the blue tree. I have 19 into Blessed. I have considered taking this out. I honestly don't know how I feel about it, but with the lack of healing that the class has, I feel like this is necessary until something is done. So I have 19 into Blessed, which gives me 5% extra healing. It's not game breaking, it just helps keep you alive a little more. I have 66 into Elfborn, which increases our crit, damage, and healing. 66 into Elemental Expert, which just kind of increases our base damage. 10 into Spell Erosion. 66 into Master at Arms. 9 into Staff Expert, which gets us at that 75 mark, which gives us the Butcher passive. This is a very nice passive, very underrated. Heavy and light attacks damage increased by 5% when an enemy is under 25% health. It doesn't do a lot, but over the course of a long fight, if you guys are playing cat and dog, this will really help you. And also, if you decide to do PvE and you don't want to change your CP, this is an absolutely excellent passive because it synergizes extraordinarily well with VMA Destro. And then into the ritual, I have 34 points into the ritual. Most people are like, oh, well, don't you want to pump up that Master at Arms? And I typically do, but you're only going to get 1% more. If I go to Master at Arms, this is going to get increased to 72, which is the next best jump point. And honestly, I feel like anything after 66 is a bit of a waste, especially because you could do something like make your cripple hit really fucking hard, and that's what my cripple does. My cripple does 20k damage over time, so I'm very happy with that CP. Into our defensive CP, we got 51 in resistant, helps us get to that 3k point. 66 into Ironclad to prevent us from being bursted down too quickly. 56 into Thick-Skinned, 43 into Elemental Defender, and 43 at Hardy. And then I have 11 in Quick Recovery. You could also do 37 in Elemental Defender and 37 into Hardy, and then put 31 into Bastion. But since we only have one shield and it's not really helpful, we don't need a shield, we need more healing right now. I thought that 3% extra healing would complement the 5% extra healing and just go to 8% extra healing, which is kind of nice. It's not game breaking, it's just nice. The reason I put 11 here is because I like this Field Physician passive, which is helpful in both group PvP and PvE. When you're resurrecting another player, your damage taken is reduced by 15%. 15% less damage is a considerable amount. It's really nice. You only need 10 to get this, but the jump point is 11, so I put an extra one in here. And that is all. I will bring up the overview of this. In case you don't know, this add-on is quite literally called Overview. You know, take a screenshot, look at this, enjoy it, etc. And now I'm going to move on to the gameplay.